You're tuned into Fork Podcast. This week, we're talking to Haks180. Immersed in the hip-hop culture of the early 80s, he shares how he developed his passion and talent for graffiti and street art.
82, 83 was a big boom of hip-hop in general, the whole hip-hop culture. And I originally got into the dancing back when my knees were a lot better than they are these days.
We're recording, man. So I just want to welcome you here today, Hands on Fork Podcast.
Thank you so much.
So it's Hands Haks180 Schmitter. That's a
me.
long title, dude. It's hard. AKA.
Yeah, well,
Haks180.
Most people will know me by one or the other.
Yeah. What do you prefer to go by?
Well, we're longtime friends, so you can call me Hans. It's fine.
Hands it is. So only your friends call you Hands.
Yeah, well, it's just kind of like how people meet you. Like if I meet somebody from the graffiti world, probably I'm going to get introduced as Haks, and that's who I'm going to be to them, you know. And likewise, I might know them by whatever their name, or I might know them by their government name, or and just depends, I guess, how you're introduced is and how you relate to each other.
So if I'm to get the terminology correct, Haks180 is your tag, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Is that how it all starts? You start with a tag and you just tag yourself all around neighborhoods?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, yeah, you need something to write. I mean, you know, a lot of people just start off writing whatever, and you know, most people probably go through a handful of names before they get one that fits and sticks with them for a long time. And then even once you have a name, you have a lot of graffiti writers will have other aliases. You know, maybe just you get bored from writing the same letters all the time, so you might want to change it up. And or you know, you might have one name that you use when you're doing, you know, stuff out in the public, legal stuff, and then you might have another name that's your undercover alias.
Yeah. You know what? There's absolutely no problem for me in this podcast jumping right into things, because my list of things I want to cover is so extensive, because over the last couple of weeks, I started doing a little research on graffiti art, and so I'm starting to get into the history, and I read about this dude Cornbread in Philadelphia, the origins of graffiti, and then the counterculture movement of the whole thing, and that it started all in kind of deviant behavior, right? Countercultural behavior. And so if I take you back to your beginnings without getting you in trouble, obviously, what were your beginnings in all this?
Well, for me, I guess around, I'm thinking 82, 83 was a big boom of hip hop in general, the whole hip hop culture. And, you know, so hip hop is the DJing, the MCing, which is, you know, more commonly rapping, and the dancing, the breaking, and then graffiti. So those are the four main elements of hip hop. And I originally got into the dancing back when my knees were a lot better than they are these days. And so I wasn't a great dancer, but I was okay. I grew up in a small town in Middlebury, Vermont.
Dude, you've got the moves. I'm going to be clear. You have the moves. I'm going to post up a video of you dancing. No. I hope your manager, Miss Ramirez, has that video.
Yeah, she awesome. Does, and I'm sure she'd be happy to share it. But yeah, so I mean, I can still wiggle a little bit. You just don't want to see me get down on the floor. I might never get back up. But so that's originally how I got into hip hop, and then. So at that time, well, first of all, it's, you know, I grew up, like I said, in Middlebury, Vermont, which is a small town, and it's a long way away from New York City, where everything was coming out of. So we sort of had this, you know, our own interpretation, bastardized interpretation about, you know, what they're doing. You see a movie, you read a book, and okay, cool, let's go do that. And so, you know, the more books or whatever that I would see about hip hop, then I would learn about this graffiti. And I was already, you know, had been drawing since, I don't know, 3 or 5 years old. I have tons and tons of sketchbooks that my mom was kind enough to save, and of course I wasn't writing graffiti all the time, but I was just interesting to be able to take the natural ability I had in art and then bring that into some area of hip hop, which as I said, I didn't have natural ability at dancing, but I tried.
More natural at the actual artwork, right?
Yeah,
As you sort of gravitated towards graffiti, you found that that's where your talents lay.
Exactly, yeah. And, again, I'm in Vermont. It's not like I'm looking around and seeing the subways pass by. I just, have whatever I've seen in books, and I kind of translated it in my mind and made some weird version of what those guys were doing. And yeah, in a town of 8,000, if you make a lot of graffiti noise, the police will find you rather quickly. So, I managed to avoid most imperial entanglements, and but mostly by not being
most
exactly.
most
I had
entanglements.
a few problems, but nothing serious. Yeah, and then later on, that interest brought me, years and years later, in 1996, when I moved to New York City, and that's when I really, really got into it.
I didn't know you lived in New York City.
Oh, is that right? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I lived in New York for about 12 years, a little over 12 years, from 96 to,
Oh man, that
2000
graffiti was
2008.
really going during that phase, right?
Yeah. It's it depends who you talk to, which is the most important eras in graffiti, and of course everyone is the original era, and when trains were going on in New York City. That's as you said, like Cornbread from Philadelphia, like even predates some of the stuff that was going on. A lot of the stuff that was going on later in the New York City subway system, but that's kind of where it took off from. And then so that all of that was going on in the same era, the early 80s, the late 70s, which was the takeoff of all the other elements of hip hop as well.
Yeah. What was fueling you in those days? Like what brought you into that movement where you were practicing your art, and was it really motivated by counterculture? Were there things going on around you that you were trying to express through your art, or were you just being a young guy expressing yourself?
I think probably just being a young guy, and I was like, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's what I want to do,
Yeah, I think sometimes the story gets twisted afterwards, like you're really just acting out and enjoying yourself and painting things and trying to one up other people and
right. And it's like the week before I was playing basketball and I was totally into basketball, and then this is something, and then I'm that type of person. When I get into something, I get into it.
Yeah. While you paint now, do you think that your reasons are a lot more clear, or is it still very much the same thing? You're just really good at it. You enjoy it.
It's more clear in that. I think it's more clear now. I think I really, I'm pushing on 50 years old right now, and I think that that my focus and my love of it is bigger than it ever was. Like when I was living in New York, when I was right in the middle of all of that. Focus and energy and just love in general, passion for it, and my own kind of, I don't know, place in graffiti. I feel like comfortable with the style that I'm painting. I think, as you come into it, you're always like, you don't know what you're doing, so you copy some other guy, and then maybe where he has this arrow, you bend it and it becomes that arrow or whatever. But I think, most people, at least I know for myself, and some people I guess you have different evolutions of your style. Yeah. So in the early 2000s, I was painting a certain way, and and then in the late 90s a different way, and so but like right now I think is like the first time where I feel like, wow, that what I'm doing now is mine, and I don't know, I mean, not that nobody has a similar style, but this is clearly something different from, you can see my piece and you don't even have to be able to read it. As long as you're familiar with my work, you're gonna know it as soon as you see it.
Oh, absolutely.
As mine,
That I can't say for other artists, but now I think if I saw a piece of your work, I would spot it. Because knowing this podcast was coming, I was stalking your Instagram and I'm looking at it. I mean, I always did. I've been a fan for quite some time. And I've really familiarized myself with your work, and I would recognize it in a second. And you're right. You have your own your tag, and you have your own style about it. And I like what you just said as an evolution. It's like when you start when you're young, you're just doing it for your own reasons. Maybe you're doing it to be deviant. Maybe you're doing it because you're just good at it. If a young kid isn't great in school, but they're a great artist and they don't know how to express themselves, maybe they go out and paint the side of a freeway,
Right.
But as you get older, and so the artist in you, the 50-year-old, you've learned the trade, and now it seems to get layered with philosophy, right? Now perhaps you express yourself better through your artwork. Would you say that like what's going on in the world right now, do you paint about current affairs? Do you paint do you still have a countercultural sort of theme to your work?
Not so much, but occasionally. And sometimes I get involved with somebody else and we have an idea to work to something together. My fiance is from Venezuela, and so because of that, I'm probably more aware than some North Americans are about the troubles in Venezuela and the good president Maduro.
Yeah.
And so a couple of years ago, we did a really nice piece. I have a friend that's really good at characters. That's my friend Nemo. He's really nice with characters. And so we had him paint a caricature of Maduro. And then we just painted our names. I did with my other painting partner, Anger, who also happens to be my fiance. We did pieces with the Venezuelan flag colors and that.
Does she paint?
Occasionally.
She's doing this undercover because I haven't really seen her really put her stuff out there.
Yeah, well, we've done a handful of pieces together, and generally, I guess I'm doing a lot of the work and the detail stuff, but she's helping out, and she's a big help and supporter.
Yeah, I see her very present in your life and in your work.
Yeah,
she's like I say, she's your manager now.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
She really makes sure your stuff gets out there and we all see it, and she's like I think it's beautiful, man. Like she's your number one fan.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
You talked about Venezuela, and in some of the research I was doing, Latin America, like we were just talking about Brazil. There's some incredible pieces of work that come out of these.
Yeah,
don't come out of those. They obviously stay there because it's graffiti.
Right.
But what do you think? What do you think increases the level of talent in regions? Is it the need to express yourself in this? I mean, in places like that, I would imagine it's more on the illegal side of the expression. Yeah,
well, it's interesting because I was in Rio. That would have been about 2010, 2000. Yeah, I think 2010. I was in Rio for a couple of weeks, and that was a really great graffiti experience. Just in that, and I didn't. I'm trying to think, did I? No, I didn't paint. I might have caught the occasional tag or whatever here and there, but I didn't paint any pieces. I didn't know anybody there, and I wasn't really in the front of my mind at that point. Throughout my career, I guess, so there's been times where I painted more or less, and that time I think I wasn't painting that much, but the trip there was pretty influential in the next phase of my life, and sort of like a I don't know, reemergence, or if that's the right word. But Brazil was really well, Rio, because I didn't go anywhere else in Brazil, was really interesting because they had super talented artists. And in New York, and I'm sure it's different, you know, it is different now. Although I don't live there, of course, I visit whenever I can. But the whole graffiti world has changed since then. But because of the street art, and so you know, you can get into some debate about what's the difference and all that. But in general, graffiti, you know, is originally, you know, near letter based, your name based artwork, and of course, there's always people who are letter based writers or graffiti writers that I would consider hardcore graffiti writers that also do characters. But when I went to Brazil, it was the first time that I really saw people just doing wild stuff that didn't have anything to do with letters, but was amazing. And I thought, wow, you know, because in New York, in the real graffiti culture, people might look at you a certain way, like, oh, you're not really down with graffiti if you're doing this corny stuff or whatever it is. And in some cases, I still feel that way. Like, I mean, there's when people talk about the difference between graffiti and street arts, I would say, like, you know, every graffiti writer is a street artist because they're doing art in the street. But every street artist is not a graffiti writer. And, you know, where the line is drawn is
they're toys, right? Is that our term? Are we referring to toys?
Well,
now?
you know, there's some people who are good at what they do as street artists, incredible artists, but they're and a toy is generally someone who just doesn't know what they're doing. But so there's a lot of graffiti writers that are toys, and a lot of street artists who I would consider toys as well. But there's a lot of street artists that do amazing work. It's just not graffiti. Yeah, you know.
I just to interrupt for a second. I guess a toy can also force one to be ready to accept that something that's really good could be wiped away really fast by somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. Right?
Yeah. No. I mean, that's the part of the. The interesting thing about graffiti, and it's not necessarily a bad part about it, is that, you know, you put something out in the street and whatever happens to it after the moment you walk away is, you know, it can be wiped out the next day. It can be.
Would that be what pushes graffiti to higher levels or harder to reach places, that the artist is willing to take greater risks to get their stuff out there?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you see these guys, I'm not much of a climber myself.
Yeah. Well, you are pushing 50.
Exactly, but it's never been. I'm not crazy about heights, although yeah, I've done some pretty big.
I've
murals.
seen you pretty high up.
Yeah, and I'm not too happy when I'm up there. I'm always a little bit, oh boy, you know, a little nervous. But yeah, sure. If you go high, you know, the chances of someone going over you is slim. But of course, also one of the other things is if you're high, then you could be seen from farther away too. So, you know, it's the spots where you go to and how long it lasts. Of course, you want your things to last a long time, but and there's different personalities in graffiti, just as there is in every other part of life. There's people. I remember, you know, when I was in New York, there was guys that I swear the only reason that they were into graffiti was just a good excuse to be able to find a fight. Because you can always find a fight if you take it personal that someone goes over your stuff. You know, there's always going to be somebody going over your stuff. Just the nature of the game. And so if you choose to make that an issue worth fighting over, then you can find a fight. And there's people, yeah, I swear they were just into it for the fight.
The beef, right?
Yeah.
You guys call it, the street name is the beef, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I definitely got that impression that there was there's different layers in the culture, that there were people who were just really, it was more like gang mentality, that they want to get out there and just piss people off.
And I mean, you know, a big part of it is just, you know, destruction. You know, you get out and you know, when you're young and you know, the whole culture started by children, basically, you know,
How's that?
Well, in the 70s and 80s when you were when the New York City graffiti culture was really burning hot, was 14, 15-year-old, 12, whatever, kids just running wild back in those days. And the city didn't have money for any programs for kids, so kids were just finding whatever whatever way they could to express themselves. And one of those ways was go steal some paint and run wild in the train yard when they didn't even hardly have fences around. So kids were doing it, and a lot of people at that time, they would not continue their graffiti career once they got old enough to do proper jail time, because you're 14 years old. The most they're going to do is maybe the cop's going to slap you around a little bit and spray some paint in your face, send you on your way home. Oh yeah, I know a lot of guys who got that treatment. And then, and if they did take you in, then, you're probably going to spend the weekend scrubbing subway station or something like that, where you're going to meet 10 other guys that are also graffiti writers. And then right after you get out of your work service or whatever, then you're going to go get together and go paint something. Wow. So yeah, that's how it kind of started as children, and probably people going, past their teens, of course, and there's always been people who weren't children, that continued doing it. But for the most part, in those early days, it was kids that was doing it. The whole hip hop culture was all kids,
Yeah.
And now we're just a generation of people who grew up in that culture, and some of us didn't want to leave, and some of us don't want to grow up.
I'm really taken back. Honestly, I'm a huge fan. Like, there's no doubt. I love the idea that and by the way, though, that your t-shirts are awesome. Give those t-shirts a shout out. Can we get those?
Well, these t-shirts, the one that I'm wearing now is something that I designed for the Under Pressure Festival, which is a big festival that they hold every year here in Montreal, usually in the mid-August. So this is a shirt that I designed for the festival. I'm not sure if you can get the shirts online through their website, which would be underpressure.ca. But I'm not sure if they sell them online. But in any case, come to the festival next year, and for sure they're going to be selling these, and then the new ones, and then the old ones. And I've designed a couple over the last few years. Since living here.
So that's all part of what that I'm very impressed with you at. That one, you grew up in this great culture of expression and graffiti. You and I are. I'm just a tiny, like a year or two older than you, and I'm a fellow guy who doesn't want to grow up either. I'm much more comfortable around younger people. Mm-hmm. I love to just down dress. I don't like wearing ties. And everything about you is something that I admire. And now, if on that subject, if we look at, say, the evolution of your work, and now you're near 50-year-old. Did you say you are 50 or you're
in February? I'll be 50.
In February, you'll be 50. You obviously have a better understanding for what you're doing right now. Mm-hmm. And do you think that as you get older, you lose certain ways of expressing yourself because you know that if we overexpress ourselves, and sometimes we're too honest, and we have censorship, and there's all kinds of things that are involved in our life as we get older, that we understand that it's no longer really only about us. We have a greater responsibility, and sometimes we have to hold ourselves back in certain ways if we want to get part of our message out, or maybe 90% of our message, and we hold back 10% because we know if we add that 10%, the level of offensiveness or the negative repercussions of that aren't worth doing. And it's better to just get that 90% out. So are we always living in art? Are you always living with a certain amount of understanding of censorship, or holding back just enough and not fully expressing?
I don't I mean, I guess that certainly could be the case. I mean, being that my artwork is not like super political, or I think, whenever I feel the need to say something political or might be disturbing, then I think I feel pretty free to say it.
Do you? Yeah.
Yeah, other artists who might be like, say, like a gallery artist, that's really making a lot of money in a gallery, then they might not want to, cross a certain line. And maybe if I was a more successful gallery artist, I might have that concern.
But it could be the opposite too. The more successful you are, the more you can push the status quo.
I think that's true for sure. I mean, once you've crossed the limit, and people are always, you have that name that people are always going to come to you, then no one's going to be able to stop you at that point.
Yeah. What would you say is like the piece that have you done anything recently that you find is a great expression of yourself?
Since, like I said, I'm kind of really in a groove with my personal style right now. What I'm interested in is painting that style, and that has to do with letters. I'm constantly trying to do my best at that.
What about that baby wearing the gas mask?
Okay, so
okay, wait, hold on.
Right,
that just popped out at me. What's that all about?
I was thinking about that. Yeah, so that was in the Under Pressure Festival that we were just speaking about, and a couple of artists who had met before, that had participated in the event before. They were from New Caledonia, so way on the other side of the planet, and they were coming to paint. That's QB and Yexo were my partners in crime on that one.
It's a huge piece, man.
Yeah, it's a big mural that's right off of St. Catherine, not too far, a little bit east of Saint Laurent. Those guys came from New Caledonia, and they actually were the ones that had the idea for the theme of the piece, which is political. So it's a baby wearing a gas mask and sort of playing with like a little plastic shovel, like you see on the beach or whatever. And then in front is a traditional sort of home, like a hut, I guess you would say, from New Caledonia. And the baby is sitting on top of this Greenland nickel. The metal nickel is they're rich in nickel in New Caledonia, and so obviously it's being mined, and the process of their mining it is basically in destroying their environment, in their whole ecosystem. Right. And so that's the point of the baby wearing the gas mask. Like, you keep doing what you're doing, this is what you get. You're going to get your kid on a beach with wearing a gas mask just so he can go outside to play. And then the roof of the hut has been removed, and from inside of the hut is flying out all these butterflies. And so the theme of the wall is the butterfly effect. That your action is causing waves of reactions all around the world. And it's great. It's great to. I love painting. I love painting my name, and I like that people can appreciate that. But it's also great to be able to have that platform to be able to say something, And now in the case of like this Under Pressure festival where you have like a couple days, 2-3 days, whatever, to paint, and you have access to scissor lifts, and then, big murals that are happening now, then you have a greater chance to express yourself in some way. And yes, like when these guys came to me with that idea, they said, what do you think about this idea? And we can change it if you're not into it. It's just the three of us on the wall. So, they didn't want to just force me to do something that meant something to me. And I thought, that's great. I love it. Let's do it. Yeah. But at the same time, I painted my letters at the top and helped, I helped out filling in things here and there. But QB and Yexo, who are more specialists in character drawing and things like that, they were working on the parts of or at least the details of the parts of the piece that were the more meaningful parts. My name's in the background is a beautiful accent to the message of the piece. So I would say, yes, I have that desire, but maybe I don't have the time to do that, or maybe my focus is just not there all the time.
Yeah. You're doing some work in Las Vegas right now, right?
I just finished up a project in Las Vegas with A-Shop is a group here from Montreal that's with the biggest graffiti-based mural company in I don't know, probably in Canada, I guess. So they had a job, and I got hired by them to go with 12 artists out to Las Vegas, and it's kind of semi-top secret exactly what it was. But in any case, it was in one of the big casinos out there. And we got to work on this. It was a really great project because basically what they wanted is an environment to look like a city, that's been really just blown to hell with graffiti.
Oh.
And so we got to do whatever we wanted, which was, you never get that kind of job. People want you to paint a nice picture of an old lady or something like this. They were just like, just get wild, whatever. And, of course you had some restrictions.
For sure, yeah.
But for the most part, it was just like, well, any other Saturday, you'd find these 12 guys doing the same thing for free. And even coming out of their own pocket for the paint, and here we are getting paid for it and flown out to Las Vegas. So
yeah, when's that being unveiled? Is that?
I think the official kind of opening of the whole area is going to be in mid-November. Is what I heard.
Okay, so we'll look forward to seeing that on your social media, on your Instagram.
Absolutely.
Which you promised to be more on top of.
Yeah, a little more diligent. Yeah. Otherwise, my manager / fiance will be all over me. So
That's it, man. Well, listen, Haks180, man, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming in here today and sharing all this with me and our listeners. Awesome experience, man.
Well, thanks a lot for having me. I'm a big fan of the show. I listen all the time, so it's great to join you today.
All right, dude. So listen, you have an awesome day. Keep painting. And as I understand, you're heading right out to Vermont after this.
Yeah, I have a little job down in Vermont. For the next 2 evenings, I think I'll be painting on this, and yeah.
And while you're down there, just go tag your old neighborhood.
Maybe a little something.
All right. You guys all have an awesome day out there as well.
All right.
Take care, my man.
Thanks, man.